go to that on occasion. But we've never had a time where we haven't been able to communicate with the buses or them with dispatch, other than the occasional, the way the island, the geography of the island, there's always going to be some dead spots.
Uh-huh. And to my understanding, the drivers are not allowed to use their cell phones in case of emergency, is that correct?
There's protocol on how they use that. I mean, they can't be driving down the road. They would have to pull over and secure their vehicle and then make that emergency call.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? We're being very flexible here.
Jeff Lauderdale, Coopville. Well, first I'd like to welcome the 3 new members of the board. I'm glad to see you come to take on this challenge. And I'm also really pleased to see you getting into the details, because that's where the devil has popped up its head for this organization during the last several years. Personnel changes aren't enough, though. I mean, this is your first meeting, you've got a lot of meetings to go, and your interest needs to remain steady and fixed, and you need to stay in the details. In my view, maybe some of the problems are fixed, but they're not proven. We're 15 days into, I think it's 15 days into January. You have a brand new executive director. He's unproven. I hope you do prove yourself. You have a lot of challenges coming. You have your audit findings, which might be expensive from last year's audit. You have a criminal investigation going on. You have a union that's forming somewhere in the background. So you have a number of challenges coming on, and I hope you remain totally engaged because it's necessary. Couple of things that I would like to see so that we, the public, can help you is you need to be more forthcoming with your documents. 2 things that I'd like to be able to see every time prior to you meeting is the cash flow statement that I presume is in your packet, and an up-to-date budget versus actual department expenditures, so we can see how each of the departments stands in relation to the budget, that much money that they've been budgeted. The reason why I think that should be foremost in all of our minds is last year, by mid-year, every department was way over budget until major cuts were made. And it's too late to fix things properly at that point. So I'd like to see those. You have a website. You've spent a lot of money creating a website. And attaching those 2 documents or any other pertinent documents to that website is simple and easy to do. For example, I tried to get the agenda for this meeting. I found it at the end of the 2014 agenda items, and it's really not there because I tried 3 times, which is the definition of insanity. I got the same message. It's error 404, which means the file's not there. That server can't find it. So please put it on your website. It will have the ability for more people to notice if things are going south, and then we'll be talking to you. And my second issue is I think this organization needs to have a clear division of its money. It's restricted money and it's regular old green money for operations and maintenance. You say you have a reserve fund, it ought to be in a separate account. You have capital money from grants that are clearly colored and restricted. They need to be in separate accounts. I discussed this with the Island County treasurer, who is your banker, de facto banker, and she told me last year, of course we have a new one now, she told me, Anna Maria Nunez told me that they would be happy to provide separate accounting for your different flavors of money for free. And it would make it far easier or far more difficult to go astray in spending capital money for operations money and that sort of thing, which is a track you don't want to step. And finally, this is just a personal thing, and maybe it's petty, but you keep referring to us as the audience. I don't know, it rankles me for some reason. We're the public.
I'm a writer.
And this is not a show. It's not really that entertaining. I'd like to be referred to as the public instead of the audience. Just a personal thing. But anyway, welcome. I hope you do good things. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Gil Zacco Kirk. You already covered the public information. I was all over that website yesterday and this morning trying to get the agenda, so we knew what was going on. I will follow up with Shelley's information about the Priuses. I just walked past the red one in the parking lot, still not marked correctly. No less than 1 1¼ inches contrasting letters on the side of the door. Not that little thing in the back of the window, which Mr. Clay explained to me that, what was it, that the auditors, their hit about the marking was that the decals in the wrong side of the window. That was a misleading comment right there. The vehicles still are not marked correctly. You know, and I know Mr. Graska, he knows, I'm sure, he's been in the business for a long time. You know about the way that they're supposed to be marked. For official use only. Even though you don't drive them, but we do know that you get a stipend every month, so, for your vehicle. So that's not a big thing. Just, if we're gonna keep the Priuses, please mark them accordingly, in accordance with state and federal law. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you for your comments. We're going to move on to our next item is monthly reports. And Ken, you've been here almost a full month, so you get to do the executive director's report.
Exactly a month, yes. Thank you. And it's been a constructive month, I think. From time to time, as we have major issues to present or major or important items that the board needs to be educated on, I will have reports from various managers to present to the board so that they've got the detail that they could provide you, and also the intimate knowledge of whatever the topic is to answer any questions. So from time to, it may not be the same managers each month, but that's my style of reporting and providing information to the board so that you've got the folks that are in the trenches providing you the most accurate information possible. This month we've got a financial report, which I think we pretty much covered, but I know that Paul has some things he wants to talk about, and you are getting a budget book for the year 2015, and I want to, and I'd like Paul to describe that a little bit. So, Paul?
Okay. Maybe I should start with a small packet that we were talking about a little bit. I just wanted to highlight a few things about our monthly operations. First thing is that our ending year cash is around $953,000, which is above what we projected, about $16,000 that we projected in our budget. So that's a good thing, I think. Our cash increased in this month by $277,000. It's partly because we've caught up once again with our grant payments. They come in an irregular way, sometimes at the beginning of the month for the previous one, and sometimes right at the end of the month. So we didn't see some of those payments in November, but we did see like double payments in December, so we caught up that way. So an increase in cash of $277,000, that's a positive sign. like I said before, tax revenue increased from the previous December by almost 7% and 6.5% over the 2014 over 2013. So, like I said, we budgeted 5%, and we were conservative in that way, and we were hoping that our revenues, our sales tax revenue, will exceed what we estimated. So I think that's a good direction as well. If we look at our budget actual report, we're showing say a profit of $200,000 in December, but a lot of that has to do with that double grant payment. If we average that out a little bit, we're seeing somewhere in the range of $100,000 to $115,000 in the black each month in the last few months, and that as well is a good sign. Some of the projects that we're taking on next year is Parker Road, which has already been mentioned. We're kind of holding off on the security cameras. We implemented a little bit of that in 2014, but that wasn't budgeted to be implemented in 2015. But we're doing Parker Road and purchase of 4 or 5 buses, depending on the pricing that we get. What was that third one?
The repeaters.
The repeaters, that's right, that we've already talked about as well. So we really only have those 3 grants on the docket for 2015.
That's already money received, Paul, but
Well, it's not money that we've received yet, and it's not money that we've spent yet, it's just been budgeted. And when we go out and purchase those, we'll have a short time frame where we'll purchase the item, and then we'll apply for the reimbursement.
Okay.
So we have our share of it, and also mostly like 86% is going to be paid by the various agencies that we've gotten those grants from. The third page on that report breaks out the expenditures versus the budget by department. And I think it's interesting to look at that because it shows us that almost in every department we've cut our costs, but we haven't been able to realize any savings in paratransit. Where we know that the expenses continue to rise or remain consistent or at least slowly rise. And so we see a little bit of overage there. And of course, the administrative side is explainable in that we have our expenses for note and bond payments, which have exceeded what our budgeted amounts are. But in every other area, we've been cutting our costs. On the operations side, that one report near the end of the packet, we can see that ridership's down 10% in 2014 from the previous year. Service miles are down 7%. Service hours are down 10%. And our fuel cost is down 8%.
I'm lost, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm just kind of touching on some of the highlights of, I think it's the second to the last page in this packet, the operations report that we were talking about.
It comes after the,
Okay.
And I just wanted to touch on a few highlights. And the 2014 ridership has been decreased by, it's gone down by 10% for the year. Service miles is down 7%. And the service hours, which is the number of hours our operators spend driving those buses, is down 10% for the whole year. Of course, our service cuts were implemented 3/4 into the year, so we're not seeing the full extent of those cuts. If you look at service hours month against month in December, it's actually down 20%. So just wanted to touch on those. Fuel cost is down 8% for the year, but 23% if you look at December versus December. So we're experiencing,
savings.
big savings of fuel cost increasing. Fuel costs, or diesel cost, is down 14%, and unleaded is down 3.5%. But month against month, diesel is down 20%, and unleaded is only down 1%. So we buy fuel from 4 different sources, and we get different prices from all the sources. And diesel and unleaded are moving at a little different rate. So there are a lot of factors involved in that. But overall, we're seeing cost savings in fuel, which is helpful to the agency, another positive sign. Like I said, we're planning to purchase some buses mid-year at considerable expense, around $200,000. And from our agency, that's our share, about $200,000. And we're also planning on purchasing the repeaters and also a smaller cost to this agency. But, looking over the longer term, our plan is to pretty much be about where we are right now in cash position at the end of 2016, which will allow us to pay not only our WISTIP payment at the end of in October of 2015, but also we have another one in January of 2016. So we're looking out into a little longer view, and I think we should be able to make those two obligations, and then from that point on, further build our cash reserve.
Explain what the WISTIP is.
WISTIP is our insurance that that's the agency that carries our insurance. Now I'd like to direct your attention to this booklet that I created. It's the 2015 budget book, and this is something that we use in-house and have used in-house for a long period of time, but we felt it would be really good to distribute it to the board because it gives you a lot of good information. The difference between this one and the previous book is really just the emphasis more on the budget side and the financial side. And the beginning just gives you a small introduction, explanation about the budget process and our budget resolution. And then it goes on to show the different pieces of the budget that we were presenting to the board and that they approved. Following the budget section, there's some charts. Let's see if I can get the page. On page 35, there are a couple of graphs there that shows different pieces of information that were shown previously, and then there's a little bit of an addition. But it shows like ridership for various components here at the agency. And then on page 38, 39, and 40, it gives some more statistics about riders served and bus miles, operator hours, both by breakout by some of the routes and then also by month. So you get a chance to look at the various changes in ridership and operator hours as they occurred over 2014. Then beyond that, there's more information about the history here of Island Transit. Gives you a good background of how the agency has progressed and various partnerships and other connections that we have to the community. And at the very end of the booklet, it gives you a wage grid and an organizational chart. So it's really a booklet designed to provide a lot of information about the agency, but emphasis is on the budget. So,
And this should be online now, is it not?
is it online? That's a
I
good
don't
question.
think the budget is, but this book.
Books.
So it's just, but it's on my action items.
This is a fantastic piece of material, and it certainly answers lots of questions I've heard the public state and they'd like to have. The newspaper talks about transparency. Well, this answers a lot of those questions, and I'm really pleased that you put it together. I'd like to see it, make sure that we get it disseminated some way, either in hard copies available here, if we have to charge for some, because this isn't free, this is, costs quite a bit of money put together. Yeah, there might be a minor charge for it, or if we put it online, the whole thing.
Definitely online.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm thinking of the TDP, typically, once the TDP book is finalized,
Yeah.
it goes to the libraries and a lot of places. We have a distribution list.
Well, this should go, you know, be right there, right along with it, yeah. At the county and the towns and all that, you know, where we post stuff. Good job.
That's really all I have to say in my report.
Questions?
Does the narrative in here reflect policies or their where's the source of the narrative coming from? Is it just internal understanding, or what is it more policies that are reflected in the narrative?
I mean, I haven't been here that long, but I would say it probably isn't strict policy. It's probably more of like a history, so informational. I think it was probably compiled over a long period of time.
And if I could follow on and ask a question of the existing board members, was that history developed in cooperation with this board, or was it developed independently by staff? Does the board know?
I think staff, board might have been involved a little bit in it, but most of it is staff. putting it together.
Yes,
And unless it's a resolution,
Well,
and then that would have been, or a policy, then that would have been done by the board.
so,
I think we do have a book of operational policies that we follow, for example, in terms of budget preparation. But a lot of this is descriptive, descriptive statistics and descriptive history.
And I will add that there are many projects and many programs in the narrative that would have had to have been authorized by the board to be established. So those programs and projects are reflective of whatever board policy or activity occurred to create those programs. So, for example, the Transit Parks program, the surplus vehicle program, and various other things that over the years I would expect were discussed with the board, and where necessary, board action was taken. But this is a compilation of all those efforts.
In terms of official board policy, I think the budget part is officially, I might say, certified on page 7. And that's the part of this document that probably has legal standing, and the rest is not really official policy per se.
So I guess the catalyst for my question is, and when it makes statements like, it's our goal to develop pocket transit parks up and down Whidbey Island in order to capture ridership. I just picked that sentence random. Is that our goal? Was that, I mean, when we put out some of these things, and and I just received this today, so I haven't gone through it, but there's some adjectives in here, and there's some goal statements in here, and what I'm just trying to clearly understand when we put this out is that this is the values of this board, or if this was a presentation of values that was developed by previous staff and their value sets. And so that's really what I'm trying to get to is, as we put out documents and we say this is kind of the historical perspective of the organization, what I want to understand is does the board take ownership of this historical perspective, and do we agree with these statements, or kind of where they came from? That's how I kind of present that.
I think my answer to that would be that as I compiled it, I saw it as a historical document that would just help explain a little bit more about the agency and maybe how it developed over time, without really taking into account the idea of it being a policy document.
And
If I may, under the umbrella of flexibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, what Commissioner Johnson's saying here, I agree, because, and first off, I would say this is very well put together, okay? However, when I look at this, and if I was somebody right at the outside looking in, as a board member, if I was the outsider looking in at me, I would be saying, the public outside looking at me, I would look at it as, this is your policy. And as such, I think it should be something that the board, if we don't have a set of policies, policy guidelines, that we should certainly address putting something in writing. It's generally accepted. You know what I mean? Just so that, because this makes it look like it's speaking for all of us, that perhaps it's not. But it is very well put together. I've got to commend you on that.
Well, I think since we have not physically done something like this before.
Right.
This hasn't been presented to the board. You're the first board that's received something like this.
Yeah, it's
And I
nice.
think here's the executive director and his staff presenting it to us for our perusal, and either we support it or we say maybe we'd like to clarify some things. And realizing that we are an advisory group establishing policy rather than, we don't do day-to-day stuff, but we approve it if it comes to us. So if maybe we want to sit and discuss it, or individually look at it for a period of time, and if we like this sort of a presentation, and then we would give our approval to it, or change, whatever, yeah, whatever. Or maybe it should be stated on here that this is, this is
Well,
not.
I mean, I'm really not trying to like be a roadblock. It's my first meeting. I'm trying to understand conceptually what's going on.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are. It's the narrative that I think speaks for the organization in terms of its value sets and where it's headed and where it places its emphasis. And again, I don't want to get in the weeds, but I want to, when we say things like the spirit of our fair free policy is in line with our mission, that's a big statement to make. And so what I want to make sure is when we put these things out there, that we as a board, when we're talking, say, yeah, this is what our mission is, and we're in agreement as we move forward. And that our budget then supports what we state in our narrative as our values. And so, I mean, I do think that historically that's probably been true. It's difficult getting this on the very first day, knowing the difference between what has actually been board policy and what has just been presented as values for the board and the community. And I can't at this point differentiate between those two. So maybe we can, I like it, but maybe before we go hog wild on the releasing, we could just come back to it in a month after we've had time to work through it and see if there's any areas where people may be uncomfortable.
at this point, we could consider a draft document.
It's a very nice draft.
It is well put together.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
In working with Paul and putting this together, I would say that Paul was more the compiler of this than the writer of it. I mean, this is all cut and paste type stuff from other documents, other pieces of information, and I don't think any of us could begin to figure out, what was what was approved as policy or what was approved as direction or vision from the previous 25 years. So I think it was Paul's best effort to piece together what we feel today as where the organization is.
That's good.
Okay.
Well, I make a motion then that we consider this document as a draft for future review.
I second.
We'll move to second to consider this document presented by the interim executive director as a draft document for further review. Any further discussion? Ken?
I think one of the most useful contributions that we could make would be to try to pull out and summarize in a short list what some of the implicit goals are.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can see whether we want to adopt those or modify them. Because otherwise the document's pretty hard to work with in this length.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Interim Executive Director, what's next?
Thanks, Paul. Next report is operations report. Sean Harris has a review of what the previous board had been hearing about for a couple of months relative to system enhancements that were to be looked at after the service cuts in September. With public input and with further analysis at the staff level, staff went back, before my time, the staff went back and reviewed where some restoration of service could be provided with the existing resources, existing revenue, existing number of vehicles and so on. And I think Sean's done a very good job, and his staff, in preparing what I think is a considerably improved coverage, service coverage, to many areas that lost service as a result of the cuts. And we're trying to restore as much availability of service as possible to a broader area. So, Sean?
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Graska kind of covered a lot of the history on that, and we were tasked to make these cuts in June. And we went out to the community, and we talked to the community, and we heard what they had to say. They were very displeased about a lot of the cuts. It affected their livelihood. And we heard a lot of stories from a lot of those people that were affected. These cuts affected commonplaces such as getting to school, after school activities, work, doctor's appointments, grocery